People who work the night shift often have supernatural encounters. Now, there was a story that came out of Arizona. There's this man named Edward. Edward said he got a job right outside of the Navajo reservation at this small gas station. Now, he said his manager, this older Native American man, he told him before he started this job, he said, there's one thing you must know. There is a set of rules that I have when you work night shift here at this gas station. He said the first rule, now this is the most important rule. When it strikes midnight, you must lock the front door and do not unlock it ever until the morning. He said the second rule, if someone comes to that door and they want to come in after midnight, do not let them in. Even if it seems like they need help, even if it seems like someone you know, do not let anybody into the gas station after midnight. And he said, because they aren't really people. He goes, Edward's like, what do you mean? And he said, I can't talk about it, but just make sure you do not let them in. And he said, the third rule is you must keep the lights on all night long. Don't ever let the lights go out. And if the power goes out, you are to turn this lantern on and some of these flashlights, but do not let it get dark in here. And he said, the fourth rule, you must never answer the phone after midnight. He said, even if it continuously rings like someone important is trying to get a hold of you, do not pick up that phone. So Edward was like, okay, at the time he just kind of thought it was ridiculous, but he's like, all right, I'll do it. So he works at this gas station for several months, and he listens to what this man tells him. And he locks the door at night, and he keeps the lights on, and he doesn't let anyone in. Well, this one night, there was a really bad monsoon, and it was raining, and there was lightning and thunder. And it struck midnight on the clock. So he locked the door. At 12:01, he hears a knock at the door. And when he goes to the front door, and he looks out the glass, he sees this woman. She is completely soaked. She's muddy. Her eyes look very wide. She looks in distress and like something is wrong. And she goes, please, please let me in. You have to let me in. And she's, crying and screaming, banging on this window. And he's like, look, I'm sorry, we're closed. Like, I cannot let you in. And she goes, no, please, you don't understand. You have to let me in. And she, banging harder and harder. And he's like, I told you we're closed. Go away. He said, that's when this woman, at the time, you could see her from this light that was outside. It was shining on her. But when she stepped outside of this light, he said that's when he noticed her face started to change. She didn't look human anymore. She looked like some kind of monster. And he said she just twisted her head to the side and she took off running. And instantly he got this feeling of dread, like something was wrong. Well, he said all night long, he could hear stuff yelling at him from outside, telling him to open the door. Some of these voices sounded like his family members, friends. And he said all night long, something was harassing him. Well, that freaked him out, but he really needed this job. So he was there for a couple more months. And then he said one night, the worst thing happened. They had a blackout and the power was completely gone. And he said it was completely dark in this gas station. Now he'd locked the doors and everything, but he remembered what that old man told him. Do not let it get dark in here. So he scrambles to find this lantern and he starts trying to get it lit. And he can hear stuff moving around. And he can see shadows of things running around the gas station. And he can hear this laughter. And he could hear banging sounds coming from outside like something was trying to get in. Finally, he manages to get this lantern on. But all night long, once again, he could see things running around. He could hear voices calling him, telling him to come out of the light. And the next morning, he was so terrified, he quit this job. And he said that was probably the most terrifying job he'd ever worked, working night shift at a small gas station outside of the Navajo reservation. At night when you have to turn the lights off in your house and you get to that last light and you switch it off and it's completely dark and it feels like all of a sudden your house has now become the most haunted house in the world and you have to make a run all the way back to your bedroom. There might be something to that. Now, when we are doing this, right, we put ourselves in a vulnerable position. And I think anything negative, any kind of spirit that is a negative entity knows this. This is the best time to scare us. And they're trying to see if they could scare us just a little bit to gain entry and to allow them permission to come into our lives. So this is a story I heard out of Rockford, Illinois. There was this girl and she lived in this bigger house all alone. And it started to get late. She wanted to go to bed. So she starts going through her house, turning off all the lights. She gets to the last light, which is in the living room. And when she hits it off and it goes completely dark, she gets that feeling. Well, she walks through her living room, and as she walks past her kitchen, she turns and kind of glances in, and she sees a woman, like in a white gown, just standing in the kitchen. And she's like, "Who are you? What do you want?" And the woman just starts walking towards her. So she takes off running to her bedroom. She closes her door, locks it, and she calls the police. The police show up, and she says, "Come inside. Like, there's a woman in my house. I'm in my bedroom, locked in there. I don't want to come out." So they go through her house, they search it, they don't find anyone. And they said, "Ma'am, are you sure you didn't just see something? Like, are you just tired and maybe there was like a hallucination?" And she goes, "No, I'm for sure there was a woman in my kitchen." So they said, "Well, we can't find anything. You probably are just tired. Why don't you just go to bed?" So they leave, and she goes back up to her bedroom. And when she lays down in bed, she kind of feels like, you know what, maybe that was just, in my head. Maybe I'm just tired and I need to get some sleep. So as she turns around to adjust herself in the bed, there is the woman standing right next to her. And she jumps up, she runs out of her house, and she said as she's in the front of her house, she can see the woman looking out of her window, staring at her. There's been a lot of creepy stuff that has been happening in Texas over the past couple of years. There was this woman named Deborah. Deborah was from a place just north of San Antonio, and she lived with her husband and daughter. Well, one night she was coming home late from the store, and she pulls into her driveway. She gets out of her car, and she starts unloading groceries out of the trunk. All of a sudden, she starts to hear a rustling sound behind her. And out of these woods that were across the street from her house, she sees 3 children walk out. They are dressed in all black, and they look sort of out of place. They proceed to walk up to her, and they have sort of this soft spoken voice. "Ma'am, can we play with your daughter? Can we come inside and hang out with your daughter?" And she's like, "Who are you? Like, where did you come from?" They don't say anything. She goes, "Look, my daughter is like asleep, and it's late at night. Like, what are you guys doing out? Where are your parents?" They don't respond to that. They just keep asking her, "Can we come inside and play with your daughter?" So she's like, "Look, no, you cannot. Like, I don't know who you are. It's late at night. Like, you need to go back home." But they kept on, like, taunting her, saying, "Let us play with your daughter." And as she kept telling them no, they became more and more aggressive. So they started to yell insults, and they started cussing her out. And she runs inside and gets her husband. Her husband comes out there thinking, like, who are these kids? When he gets outside, there's no one out there. So he comes in and he tells his wife, like, "Are you sure you've seen kids out there? Because it's just completely quiet. There's no one out there." But she's insistent that these kids were harassing her, asking to play with their daughter. So after a few weeks, she kind of forgets about all this. And she's at home one day. Her daughter's in the bedroom. And she overhears her daughter, like, laughing and giggling, like she's hanging out with someone in her bedroom. But she knows that it's just her and her daughter. So she calls for her daughter. And when her daughter comes to the living room, she asks, "Hey, like, what's going on in your room? Like, is there someone here? Like, why are you laughing and, like, giggling like you're playing with someone?" And she goes, "Oh, mommy, like, my new friends, I invited them in and they came into my room and we're playing." She goes, "What new friends?" And she goes, "I met them. They came from the woods across the street." And so instantly the mom's like, "Stay here." She runs to the bedroom. And when she opens the door, there's no one there. So she goes back to her daughter and says, who are these kids? Like, where did they go? She goes, "Mom, I don't know. They were in my room." She goes, I've been playing with them for the past couple of weeks." And so the mom is just like floored. Like, did she invite these kids that I seen outside in the house? So she tells her daughter, "You are not to hang out with them anymore until I talk to their parents and figure out, like, what's going on and talk to them about how they were harassing me." So the daughter agrees and she goes back to her bedroom. And so she leaves her house and she goes around to some of the neighbors and she starts asking them, like, "Do you know anything about these kids?" And none of the neighbors know who these people are. And so she comes back to her house. And when she gets back to her house, it's now dark. She sees her daughter next to the woods across the street. So she immediately runs over to her. "What are you doing? Like, why are you out of the house?" She goes, "Oh, mommy, I'm going to play with the kids that were in my room. They told me to come in the woods." And so she tells her, "No, you get in the house now." So she brings her in the house. And over the next couple of weeks, she keeps, hearing about these imaginary friends that she can't see that this girl's playing with, but she never sees them again. And then one day they were driving and they were in this terrible accident, and the daughter got hurt really bad. So did the mother. And Deborah attributed that to this encounter she had with these strange children. Anyone else notice that time has been speeding up? Like just the other day, I didn't even realize that it was Christmas in a couple days, because to me, it still feels like it's October. And over the past, I would say 6 to 7 years, time has been moving really, really fast. And I know people say as you get older that you experience time differently, but this just doesn't seem right. Like even older people are saying time seems like it's moving faster than it did before. So the question is, what is going on? Like what is happening that we're experiencing time differently? Now, there's a story I heard about something called a time slip. It's where you can't account for periods of time or time moves differently. There was this man named Jacob. Jacob said that him and his friends, they went camping this one weekend in the Pacific Northwest. And he said they had set up their campsite and they had made this very large fire. And him and two other friends, they decided to go into town to get some supplies. So they leave their other friends around the campsite. So they get in the vehicle and they drive into town and they stop off at this general store. And they get some supplies and they get back in the truck. But when they get back to the campsite, they're shocked to see that this very huge fire that they built is just now coals. It is burnt down to the ground. And they said, we couldn't have been gone that long. Like, how did the fire burn out so fast? Well, the other weird thing is that all of their friends were gone from the campsite. So they get out of the car and they start looking for their friends, yelling their names. And then finally they hear them and they find them. And their friends are like, oh my goodness, we were wondering what happened to you because you guys have been gone all night long. And they said, no, we've only been gone for 45 minutes. And for some reason, that 45-minute trip to the grocery store was several hours. And they could not figure out what had happened in that time from them going to the grocery store and coming back to the campsite. This story comes out of Pine Ridge Indian Reservation. There was this man who said that when he was younger, he would go stay at his grandfather's house for a couple days at a time. Well, this one particular time, he goes over to his grandfather's house, and his grandfather was usually this cheerful, happy man who was always just excited to see his grandson. But for some reason, this time when he goes over to his grandfather's, he seems off. He's kind of nervous and very fidgety. And he starts noticing his grandfather's doing all these strange things, like nailing the windows shut. And he's smudging, the windows and the doors. And, his grandfather tells him, look, if you go outside and play, you come in before the sun goes down. Don't stay out there after sundown. You come in the house. Which is weird because his grandfather never really cared about any of that. And one night, he overhears his grandfather talking to this other man that he has been seeing these star people in the sky and that he was worried they might come to his house. So the young boy, at this time doesn't really know who these star people are or know anything too much about what's going on. So one night he goes to bed and this boy wakes up in the middle of the night and he said he sees 3 shadow-looking people standing in front of his doorway. And he said, they were so tall, they actually had to duck because their heads, were almost hitting the ceiling. And he said these shadow beings, they just walked up to his bed and they stood around him. They put their hands out and he began to hover in the bed. And they started to move him out of his bedroom, down the hallway. And he said, he could see everything in real time, everything that was happening. He hears his grandfather start coughing. And these shadow beings, they hear his grandfather as well coughing. They drop him. And they just took off, really fast towards the door and walk right through the doorway. And his grandfather comes out of the room, what's going on? Why are you out of bed? And he says, grandfather, and he tells him what had happened. And he said that his grandfather gave him like this talisman and said, you when you go to bed, sleep with this, keep this by your side, do not lose this. And he said his grandfather didn't say anything about what had happened, but he could tell that his grandfather was even more bothered and that he knew like that he was telling the truth.